to our second class. Today my plan is, of course, we will just talk a little bit about if there's anything to be continued from the last week's discussion. Last week we had a discussion. Yeah, what was it? A little introduction to literature. An introduction to literature, different categories or different sections of literature, how to approach literature. This was what we've been discussing last week. Today, the first point I want to discuss, I want to just introduce T.S. Eliot. If you know a little bit, you can add to what I'm saying, but very briefly we should know the author, because especially in this case, the author is very, very important. So we'll discuss a little bit about T.S. Eliot, who he is, his importance, maybe a little bit about his style also. We'll talk. Then we will gradually enter into the Wasteland. First of all, what to expect from the Wasteland and the background. Especially, I've noted a few points on the Wasteland. So we will discuss a little bit about the Wasteland. And if time permits, we will go into the prologue. We have the text here. Those who are online, if you can download the text, there are so many. Sonia, could you get the text? Yeah, okay, very good, very good. So the text, it's a little too long. How many lines? 432. Sufficiently long, boring, and difficult. I warn you beforehand. So this is what Wastelands. Okay, we will go into the thing. Anything from last week? Anything that you want to comment, remark? That could be a way of looking back also. So anything that you from the last week? Yeah. Trying to recall. Anything interesting or anything special?
I think it was just nice for me, like, to hear again the beauty of literature and just from different people, the sense of love for art and how it also breeds our humanity gets deeper, our capacity for prayer and listening to scripture deepens. So that was just like a good renewal of love for literature.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we'll go into a little bit about the author, T.S. Eliot, Thomas Stearns Eliot, and he was born in 1988 and died in 1965. Pretty long life. Of course, he has seen so much of transitions, as you can imagine. The most eventful times of even the world history, perhaps we can say. So many things happened. The most eventful time. He responded to them quite well. He was a poet. One of his poems we are studying. He has written many other poems. He has written much. Essayist. He has written many essays, especially some of his essays really changed the trends in literature. For example, his one particular essay on this John Donne and the others. They are all not Catholic, but very Christian themes, metaphysical poets. They were a forgotten bunch of poets, metaphysical poets. Very interesting. Metaphysical poets. Everyone thought that they are outdated and gone. But some of the comments by T.S. Eliot brought back this whole bunch of metaphysical poets, among whom perhaps the leader was this John Donne, an Anglican priest. He is one of the famous poems I remember is his 3-line poem. John Donne, and done, undone. John Donne, and done, undone. A good definition of marriage. Some of us that you can remember. At least one poem you still learned now. John Donne, D-O-N-N-E, Donne. That's his name, John Donne. John Donne Anderson. His poems are really interesting. Very curious kinds of poems.
Done and undone.
Undone. That means gone. Undone. Or about Hamlet. He brought in, perhaps all would accept or not, he brought out some of the very famous criticisms on Hamlet, like that, and so many of his other essays. So I'm saying his essays were famous. Then he was an essayist, a publisher. His Criterion and other literary publications were. So he was in charge of some journals, publisher, playwright. I want to, especially later also we can talk about his thing, his Murder in the Cathedral. Murder in the Cathedral is, any idea? Murder in the Cathedral. It's very famous, difficult to read, very theological, very deep reflections. We can read it, but poetical. He has written in verse. Murder in the Cathedral.
Well, saying that in English thing.
Yeah, who is that? Any idea? You remember? English saint? Thomas? Yeah. Thomas Becket. The assassination of Thomas Becket. And it is, it's really marvelous. The reflections on the temptations, reflections on sainthood. All those things are really, very deep reflections. So he has written other, but perhaps from a Catholic point of view, perhaps the Murder in the Cathedral becomes one of the most outstanding ones. Murder in the Cathedral becomes. So he's a playwright. He has written, I think, 7 or so famous plays. Then literary critic, editor, all that. Now he's one of the 20th century's major poets.
He's born in a Hindu family, right?
No, not Hindu. That is their saying. Brahmin means it is their elite. They call it
Boston Brahmin.
Boston Brahmin.
Elite
Elite family. They call it Boston Brahmin. That's the race, So he's a central figure in modernist poetry. We already, I think, some of you may have already read modernism. Anything from modernism? Any points from modernism?
It's just a different, an entirely new approach of writing poetry. So probably like Emily Dickinson is one of kind of the role models for
Dickinson. An American one is also very famous.
And it's kind of, it could be any kind of short poetries, but making use of some values inside them, which could be unpacked if you read those poems. And the style.
The style changed radically.
Changed radically. It's not a generic style of meter or rhythm. It could be anything. But you had to find the poetry inside it.
You're going to say something, huh?
This is direct, remember streams of consciousness, more open to, what our thought processes instead of being sort of regimented.
By the systems, So perhaps he became one of the central figures in this modernist poetry. That way. And of course, the poem that we're going to study is the best example of a big modernist poetry. So he's in St. Louis, Missouri. He was born from a prominent Boston elite family. So these Boston Brahmin. They are some of the high-class American people. I was just reading from in the American administration, the significant people who have been from these Boston Brahmins. Among those families, a set of families who've been highly, celebrated. But he went to England in 1947 at the age of 25, and he went on to settle, work, and marry there. And he became a British citizen in 1927, and later he renounced his American citizenship. He became there was sometimes there is a famous quotation from T.S. Eliot. What he used to speak about himself. This is a much quoted thing. He used to describe himself that I am an Anglo-Catholic in religion, a classicist in literature, and a royalist in politics. So this is what he used to tell about himself. An Anglo-Catholic in religion, a classicist in literature, and a royalist in politics. So he used to, keep his cards, visible that way. Then, yeah, he first attracted widespread attention for his poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. It's a little difficult poem, but then this became, people were even shocked by it. And definitely everyone thought that this terribly outlandish. Then the next major poem was this one, The Wasteland, Hollow Men, Ash Wednesday, and four quartets, like four quartets. It's a musical movements. The same way he writes like a musical movement, a critique on society. Of course, a couple of weeks back we just mentioned his poem on the wise men. No, what is that? Journey of the Magi. Journey of the Magi. One was very much anthology. In many anthologies, the Journey of the Magi comes. Short poem, but really thought-provoking and interesting poem. How these Magi, the wise men of the East, traveled, met Jesus. But it's saying how the meeting changed their lives. That's what it's saying. They don't speak. He doesn't speak about the meeting itself. He speaks about how they came, their journey, all that they endured, and then they're going back. And that how they were dramatically changed. Their whole life have been changed forever. So that is the very interesting way in which he narrates the journey of the Magi. That way. Yep. He was also known for his 7 plays, particularly Murder in the Cathedral, I already said. So Murder in the Cathedral is about, once again, Saint Thomas Becket. The cathedral is, of course, we know he was murdered in the cathedral. There is not Westminster Abbey, Westminster Cathedral. There's Westminster Abbey, where all the poets and great people are buried. In Britain, all the great people are buried, and the kings and queens their coronation takes place in Westminster Abbey. But then Westminster Cathedral is the Catholic one. This is Anglican. So the Catholic one is Westminster Cathedral. So he was assassinated in Westminster Cathedral. Very interesting history, because he was Thomas, and there was another Thomas also martyr. Yeah, which is the other Thomas More. They often say both kings were Henry. Thomas More, it was Henry VIII. This one, Henry II. Both were so close, so intimate friends. Henry II and Thomas Becket were such intimate friends, and he was a chancellor of the realm, very intimate. And Henry asked him to become the archbishop so that he can control the church also. But the archbishop, Thomas used to say that, Henry, don't ask me to take up church ecclesiastical responsibility. Now you are my master. If I become a bishop, then you will not be my master. Forget about it. That was Henry was a playboy, happy-go-lucky person that way. Anyway, this is finally they become such. He runs away to France for a long time. He returns and he's killed on 29th of December. 29th of December. Actually, in the poem, in the drama, Murder in the Cathedral, there is that famous sermon he gives on the all holy innocents, no? That there is a very famous that his homily is also there in the drama. What I'm saying is a very, very, very interesting. So he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948 for his outstanding pioneer contribution to present-day poetry. So quickly, that's all about T.S. Eliot. And now we enter into a little discussion on The Wasteland. It's considered to be one of the most important poems of the 20th century and the central work of modernist poetry. After modernism came, postmodernism. Postmodernism. That was in a way, a big backlash against modernism. Modernism was already against the other structured, situations. We thought that with modernism, everything is thrown to winds. But came postmodernism. That became another big transition. But anyway, this is one of the central modernist pieces of poetry. So it was first published in the United Kingdom in October issue of Eliot's The Criterion. He was the editor of this journal, The Criterion, and then it was also published in United States in December that year. Some famous phrases. April is the cruelest month. That's how it begins. April is the cruelest month. That becomes very interesting. Then I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Very, very powerful. Or Sanskrit mantra, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. That's how it ends. He employs many literary and cultural allusions from the Western canon. The Western canon, most important works of Western art and literature. He uses all this. Shakespeare, then Buddhism, and the Hindu Upanishads. So he goes here, there, everywhere. So it is now its appearance. Just look at the page. It starts with Nam Sibellam quidem cum is ego ipse oculus meis. It's an English poem starting. Vidi nampulla pendere et cum illi pueri diceret. The rest is in it's in Greek. Anyway, it is translated and put in English. Otherwise, or it is, but in all I think it will be in Greek. So it begins in Latin, then il miglior fabro. This is really something like a collage. You see, collage. Brother is here. Collage, no. Or he is doing a mosaic work. So it's a real mosaic work. It is. That means mosaic. If you become too close, you don't see anything. Am I right? So you have to really relish, enjoy the art. You have to stand at the right distance, I suppose. Am I right?
Yes. If you look too close, you'll find also faults.
Oh, no, okay. That's an advanced bail. That is yeah. So this is like truly a mosaic art. Sometimes we'll ask, where is he jumping from one to the other? You will see. You will later see. You will not see any connections between perhaps one line and next line, or one passage and next passage. But then sometimes I think, see, some people are like that, you don't understand them. You can consider them crazy or mad, but then when you go really deep into them, there is something very deep that connects these unrelated things in them. Isn't it? I often, somebody remarked about me, but then that from Shakespeare's one quotation is there. Shakespeare, this one, this Hamlet. Hamlet is mad. But then Polonius, the king's counselor, says, but there is a method in his madness. That means it is not a simple madness. In the same way, at the appearance, this is like a mad thing. Jumping from one to the other, people get crazy. But then that variety or that incongruent, pieces make it really deep, and we are taken into a very deep meanings of life, reflection, and realities, especially about modern times. Two, its theme is Grail. One thing is Grail legend. Any idea about Grail legend?
The Grail means the famous finding of the Grail cup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which Jesus used in the Last Supper.
Yeah. Yeah. The Holy Grail. The Holy Grail. Holy Grail. So there is this, in the history there are, I think, perhaps the only thing it's almost accepted by the churches. Grail is not accepted by churches. Perhaps the only such relic accepted by the church would be cross. Yes, yes, cross is accepted. There is more, I think. But I think shroud is also more or less, more or less. So it's open to question, but then yeah.
These were thorns.
The thorns, but I don't know whether you would say the thorns. They say that the thorns also, even the this it's the nails. So there is a belief that the chalice used by Jesus was taken to England by it's all mythology. What it is, Joseph of Arimathea.
Oh, goodness. I know St. Thomas went to the other direction.
You didn't say St. Thomas. So Joseph of Arimathea. These are various stories. All these are. There's no one story here. There are numerous stories. So according to these things, anyway, the Grail is somewhere kept. Whether may not be in England, maybe some part of the European continent. So there are a lot of stories about this Grail. Actually, it is even now there are even recent films on this Grail quest. No, what is that?
Funny.
Yeah, even that funny film. What is that?
The Steven Spielberg movie is on for the Holy Grail. The last.
That was from Indiana Jones movie.
Indiana Jones.
There are all kinds of this Grail legend. It lives on. It lives on for centuries. Even now, I think even in future it will come. But the story is that this chalice is kept somewhere. There are all stories about. There are all folk beliefs about. It is kept in a very deserted place somewhere. There is a chapel, and then there, angels are singing, and only the virtuous knight will be able to go there. And actually, those things will come towards in some part of this poem. So the whole poem, in one way, you can see as we call it Grail quests. The search for the Grail. Search for the Grail. But the problem is, because of the evil of people, the curse has come upon the land. Especially the connected with it is the wounded fisher king. There is a fisher king. That's also a big legend. The fisher king. The fisher king, he, in a way, he is the guardian of the Grail, but then, in a way, he doesn't really know about the Grail, the fisher king. So traditionally he is keeping it, but it's always thought that he is wounded. Some people say that he is wounded in the groin, or somewhere he is seriously wounded. So his reproductive capacity is gone. That's one thing. So he is impotent, and he is waiting for the land to be revived through the discovery of grain. And he's fisher king in the sense he is a common fisherman, like that. He is fishing and waiting for the grain. So there are these mythological concepts. In one way, I said the wasteland is at different levels. So one of the threads is this grain legend, the search for the grain. Finally, there is the discovery of the grain, and salvation comes. So in one way of looking at it is finally Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. The wasteland becomes free, finally. How it becomes free? And what are the ways in which the wasteland can be a good or fertile place? There are certain things also towards the end, especially 3 solutions to it from Upanishads. So, grain legend and the wounded fisher king is one. Maybe we can share in the group. Should we watch it now? Or maybe for it? Or maybe in the group we'll put it.
Okay.
Is it okay?
We'll send a link for
I had a little video of fisher king that I'll put in the group. Just a 3-minute video, but still we won't go waste time on those things. Now, then along with that, something very close to it is its name. Sometimes T.S. Eliot says that there are different sources of the names mentioned, but he even mentions that it comes from this famous literary work, Maud d'Arthur. Maud d'Arthur. So, Maud d'Arthur, of course, it will be Le Mort d'Arthur. In French, it will be Death of Arthur. Which Arthur? Yeah. So, which Arthur? King Arthur. Who is King Arthur? Yeah, the Round Table Knights. The famous British, the English, again, another legend. He had King Arthur and his 12 Round Table Knights. He had 12 knights who his famous Genevieve, his wife, and then so many stories around this, and they go in search of this grain. And his sword comes from the lake. Excalibur is the sword's name. Excalibur is the sword, famous sword. Of course, this is used, even Excalibur is there, other brands are there. Excalibur. So all this is Arthurian legend. The Arthurian legend. Of course, Tennyson's famous poem is there. If somebody is going to read it, it's a very interesting poem. The Lady of Shalott. The Lady of Shalott. She lives a little far away from the capital of Arthur. What is the capital of Arthur? What's the city of Arthur, King Arthur? Sorry.
Camelot.
Camelot. Yeah, right. Yeah. Camelot. She lives a little away from Camelot. Have you read Amala? This Lady of Shalott?
No, I'm not familiar with that part of legend.
Yeah, but it's very interesting. It's nice. It's not a long poem by Alfred Tennyson. But then this lady, it's very interesting. This lady lives a very happy life. She's singing songs and living very happily. She's weaving nice clothes and living very nicely. But there's only one taboo. She shouldn't look at the real world. That's all. She can see the world in a mirror. So she's looking in a mirror and weaving whatever she sees in the mirror. She's singing and happy. So everyone knows that. So there's a lady living in this castle and she's so happy and all that everyone knows. But then one day, suddenly in the mirror, she sees something flashing. Then she sees little by little a war horse coming. And that is one of the most handsome knights of this knights, round table knights. What's his name? I forget his name. Yeah, suddenly. But then she couldn't resist herself. She runs to the window and the curse is upon her. Of course, her everything breaks, the glass breaks, everything breaks. When she looks at the real world, everything breaks. Then that day she sang her last song. That evening, there's a river going to Camelot. There was a boat and she goes and lies down in the boat. And that night, everyone heard some boat going and a beautiful song sung by a lady and all that. Next day, the boat reached Camelot and there was the beautiful lady in her white dead body lying there. And that night, Lancelot, Sir Lancelot, he also came and said she was so beautiful. That's the end of the poem. He did not know that that lady died for him. So, Camelot. Why swimming?
Never looked outside, no.
I know.
Reality destroys
Only,
everything.
I know, only in the mirror. Never look at the real world. It's a very interesting book. And how very beautifully he builds little by little. You can read it sometime. The Lady of Shall. What's that?
Yesterday,
Yeah.
she was on that again. She was doing a lot of weight exercise. She was full time singing. She was so happy and singing and because most of the people are like
I know.
she was just
Happy.
loud singing and
So that's why yesterday Sunil went only 1 hour to the gym. Today he went for 2 hours. Now I know why. Okay. So Maud Arthur. So actually Maud Arthur was completed by Thomas Mallory between 1469 and 70 during the reign of. Today there are 2 copies of this. But then this is also about these myths. Okay. And perhaps one of the sources of the name the wasteland is from this, because the whole world becomes a wasteland and these knights are going to recover the Holy Grail in order to not only for them to get eternal youth. Of course, that's for if you take that grail and drink from the grail, you get eternal youth. Of course, but more than that, for the land to be restored, this grail has to be recovered. So this is the grail quest. So the wasteland. So the world is a wasteland now. That's the thing. The world is a wasteland, and you have to go in search of Amrita for whatever is to be the eternal healing. Now, T.S. Eliot says there's 2 sources for his poem. No, the 2 sources for his work, the patterns. One is Jessie L. Weston, her famous book, From Ritual to Romance. and both are related. The other is James Fraser. James Fraser, another one is a golden bulb. So T.S. Eliot uses much from these two works. Both of these, I'm just he mentions it very much. I thought I will read a little bit from. Yeah. Now this is what both the works are scanning through a lot of literary cultural practices, anthropological practices all over the world. So, for example, Golden Buff. This is about James Fraser, about the myths that scattered throughout the ancient world, that gods and men are endowed with divine powers, died during winter months, and that gods must be resurrected in the spring to allow the land to become fertile again. Do you have anything coming? Winter they die, the god should die. And spring the god has to come up again. I don't know how it is in our Indian. There's a Navaratri. Do you know about Indian Navaratri? Mm-hmm. They have to submerge this god in that river, no? Yes. So most of these things, the god is finally, submerged in water. The god has to die in water. And next year, or in Egyptian, many of the Egyptian gods, the god will be put in water finally. But then when spring comes, the god will come up again. Anyway, Christian thinking also sometimes, the god is submerged in water. Finally, the god comes up from water, not water. But then comes baptism. The person has to be submerged in water. Only if you die, you can get resurrection. In all religions, you have to die. Somehow you have to kill the god. Kill this. Yeah.
Water is the death.
Yeah, water is death.
Water is associated because it has the power to destroy everything.
Yeah. So in ways, you will see a lot of images as we read the poem. There is this killing. There is this dying. But of course, one theme that is so recurrent in the poem is John 12:24, isn't it? Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth, it remains alone. If it dies, it will come up again. So the problem, from the beginning we will see in the poem, the problem of the modern world is that we are not ready to die. We are not ready to die. Only if you die, you can love. Only if you die, you will have life. This is the recurrent theme. So, Golden Bulb is, this a ritual to romance. She studied and wrote about Grail legends. She was struck by the fact that there was no Christian story of Joseph Arimathea and Holy Grail to account for the Grail romances. Actually, there is the story of all this is made up. Joseph Arimathea. Otherwise, Christianity is not speaking about it. Only the other world, other people are speaking about it. The Holy Grail. Church never spoke of Holy Grail. Church never propagated Holy Grail. Church never said Joseph Arimathea went here and there and all that. Church has never taught that way. But then there is this popular belief that there is Joseph Arimathea taking this thing, all that is there. Yeah. Then, after reading The Golden Bug, she was struck by the similarities between the nature cults written about by Fraser and the great legends. She sees a connection between, there are a lot of, most of these ancient religions have got these cults of death or burial and resurrection in spring. But then, in one way, the great legend just Miss Western thinks that this is something similar. The great legend is also something that way. One such was the connection of wounded Fisher King. So that's also a myth. Wounded Fisher King, who is guarding the grave. These were derived from ancient rituals and provided her evidence, sometimes scanned from ritual romance. Now, what T.S. Eliot says in his notes is that for much of the symbolism in The Wasteland comes from these two books of what are they? Western Ritual to Romance and James Fraser's Golden Bug. Both of them were published in around 1920. So these were early 19th century, so early 20th century was published. Okay, but then in the poem itself, numerous sources and references are there. I already mentioned. Bible is profusely quoted in the Bible, in the poem. You see Bible references galore. Perhaps we'll immediately connect. When I teach a class, there are even Catholic students will not know these references. Who knows about Ezekiel, or all these St. Paul's references, all that they wouldn't know. And there are Hindus in this. But for us, these references are very clear and it can add depth. There's a lot of references from the Bible. Shakespeare, Homer, or Dante, then or Wagner's opera. Today there's a news in from England, BBC. I was just listening to BBC, and they are reworking Wagner's opera in Germany because this a German man is here. So you have to update us about Richard Wagner. Actually, the second half of the poem, there is this, I don't know, maybe then we can go and listen to Wagner, at least his music. We won't understand German. All that is the background to understand this opera is behind it for Wagner's operas. So what I'm saying is a lot of references are there. I go perhaps just reminding you of the first part. This is like a collage, then it becomes. All these are, most of these are disconnected. How this Bible verse is connected with the story he's saying. He presents so many stories in between. So many characters are brought forward. How he connects becomes very strange, but then in a little reflection, meditation will bring forth the connections, helping us to fish out the bigger reality. And this genre is modernism. So modernism, sometimes, as Felix already mentioned, it is an attempt to present directly the experiences without a medium of this poetical, customary dynamics like rhyme, meter. There are a lot of such customary poetical, mechanics are there. So they are trying to present it directly that way. Imagism was also this time fast growing. Perhaps it came from France, I think, imagism. So really presenting such pictures and images in a way. So So they gave up this metrical approach and all that. Just say it as it comes. But then in that there is a rhythm, in that there is a poem, in that there's a music. There is a music underneath. Such rough saying also. So this is a modernism is behind it. And finally, the narrator. We will look at the narrator much later, but the narrator is Tiresias. Who's Tiresias? Any idea? Tiresias. So Tiresias, first we don't understand who is speaking. The speaker, the narrator, is this character, Tiresias. In between, Tiresias speaks about himself a lot. He says, I, Tiresias, at least twice. He says, I, Tiresias. When we study poetry, we must remember that it's not the poet who writes. There is often a persona. So when the poet is speaking about a woman's voice, it's not the poet himself speaking, but a woman that the poet creates is speaking. Here it is Tiresias. Tiresias was the great seer of Greek times, especially the most famous Greek drama made famous by Freud and the other psychologists. What? Yeah, Oedipus. Oedipus complex. Written by Oedipus Rex. That was in those times, drama in all countries grew in holy pressings. So in Europe, drama got built up in the church. Mystery plays and miracle plays, and because the church was the place where drama grew up. Or in India or Kerala, Kathakali in temple. All other things in temple. In Greece also it was in temple. So they used to have all these gods and goddesses and the mythological things presented in temples. And they used to have, especially when during the time of Aristotle and things like that, the literature was at its zenith, and they must have had yearly competitions. So in those competitions, drama competitions, the condition was that one group has to present 3 tragedies and 1 comedy. That's it. So we don't have all the such presentations, but at least we have presentation from 1 year by 1 person. That is Sophocles. Sophocles, 3 tragedies we have. Comedy, we are not sure which is the comedy. Because it has to be a package. Because they didn't have electricity in those times. So they go in the evening, and somehow to escape from these terrible darkness, the only way is that as long as they can spend the night time in some lighted place, they'll be happy. So when we were young, there was Chautu Nadagam in Kerala. Chautu Nadagam. Actually, when we were in Chautu Nadagam was shorter, but it used to be said that Chautu Nadagam introduced by Portuguese. There's a foot stamping drama. We can translate it in English. But then all these most famous Chautu Nadagam was Carloman. Any idea who is Carloman? Carloman? Charlemagne. King Charles the Great, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles, Charlemagne. So the whole night. So here the 3 dramas we have is Oedipus Rex is the first one. Then Oedipus Colonus is the second one. The third one is in Oedipus' daughter's name. Anyway, anyone remembers the third one? Okay, you can find out later. So this is a continuing story. You know story, Oedipus. Oedipus killed his father, married his mother because of a curse. In all three dramas, these are three different dramas. In all three dramas, actually, the twist and turn takes place because of this prophet who comes. What is interesting? That is Tiresias. Tiresias is the wise man. We will see. He was a woman as well as a man. We'll see how later. He was a man, woman, and he became a man. So he knows a big problem is that we don't know what's going on inside this woman, no? Felix, am I right?
I know. I didn't realize.
I would like to ask these women, isn't it? What these men are? Why this Kolaveri deal? These men, what are they? Look at Sunil. Sindhu has written in my arm. So men, so there's this big disconnect between feminine and masculine. The only person who has been woman and man is Tiresias. So he can speak from both. Again, he is blind. We'll look at the story later. That's also important. But then, how he became blind. But then, he was in the past. It is believed that he continues to live. He's endless. So he knows the past. He is living in the present and he's a prophet. So he knows the future also. So man and woman, past and future, everything comes together in Tiresias. Naturally, Tiresias is the best person to look at what is the wasteland. The wasteland is New York. Wasteland is London. Wasteland is Rome. So all the modern cities are the wasteland. So he's the best person to connect us between ages, today, tomorrow, man, woman, everything, and make us understand this journey of this meaningless culture and how meaning can be made out of it. Anyway, we'll begin it tomorrow. Next week. Thank you. Any comments or any thoughts? Anything that you want to? Anything? Any question? Yeah.
You wanted to show us a video.
I will put it in the our group, isn't it? Is it enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give you. Look at that.
Yeah.
He thought only of the video. He never attended to anything else. Yeah.
New student.
Yeah.
That shows I was listening to you.
Okay. Then.
Would you
now
recommend us?
Yeah, come on.
Oh, I was going to ask Aditya, do you want us to read any portion of the poem before we join for next week?
At least reading, we will not, maybe, even if I won't take, at least read the first 40 lines. Try to read. Try to read the first 40 lines. And perhaps one question to reflect is, people don't want to die. What does it imply? Nobody wants to die. What does it imply? Yeah, we can, because it begins about death.
So you know, modernism.
Yeah.
The main problem was this death, right?
Yeah.
That was their focal point.
Yeah.
Of course, in history, they want this rebirth, but right before that, what was there? I read this thing from Ohio State, that,
Okay,
the period before that, what was their scope? It was just literary? How would you describe right before that?
Before that, even it was different schools, but at least in form, poetry means we knew what is poetry.
Yeah.
We had an idea about poetry, and we had very cut out themes, very clear themes about poems, about nature, about different things. Some people would write about nature or relationships or love.
It is what it is, kind of.
Yeah.
Would you describe?
Yeah, very clear themes, very nice themes. Of course, I think won't it be at this time, the same time we have this existentialism and things like that coming up? Kierkegaard and different people who started, what is the meaning of life? Of course, Kierkegaard and others are believers in God. But then Camus, Kafka, French writers, they did not believe in God. But they were asking that, see, we are born, but we don't know what it is. We are driven by an anxiety about the meaninglessness of life. Perhaps with postmodernism, that became so very strong. Right? Very interesting play. You will not be able to read it. Very painful play is Waiting for Godot. Waiting for Godot. Two people waiting, and they don't know what they are waiting for, but they are waiting. Godot, and they don't know what is Godot. Waiting, and then they are trying to make some meaning out of this waiting. Terrible play. Waiting for Godot. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, this is the yeah. Okay then. Thank you. We'll continue. Yeah.